Hey everybody on here, and I'm coming to you with this month's Connecting Codes video. I am here in my winter space and I am absolutely loving it here. It's amazing, it's incredible. Yeah, we've got some storms that are rolling in and out, but not too bad right where I am. And so it's exciting. It's exciting to be here. It's exciting to be settled down for a little bit. Those of you that know me know that I've been traveling and touring all throughout the summer and the fall. And I'm back in Maine and I'm settled down for a while now, at least for a few months, and then I'll be back on the road traveling again. But every month I'd like to get this video out on things that are happening in our world. Our world events are what we can expect based on what the codes are showing us. So this is definitely, it's not any kind of intel. It's not anything along those lines. What I do is I have my own unique way of understanding the vibrations and the energy patterns that are current. And through that, then I'm able to pull together things and piece together things that allow me to see what's happening in the world and see what's going on and see how the energy patterns are interacting. And that opens up to a wealth of information for me. Now, every year I do put out this book, a brand new one. So this is the 2023 book. It's called The Code Journey, a daily guide for life on Earth. So it's kind of this combination of knowing what's happening in our world and really knowing how to work and deal with the currents on a day-to-day basis and understanding a little bit more about them, because sometimes, a lot of times things are happening and we just we don't understand the components that are behind them. And so, again, I have to state, this is a personal opinion piece, so to say. This work in many ways is, but it's interesting how accurately it tends to play out. I get that a lot from people like, how did you know? And I write this information, like a year in advance, sometimes a year and a half, depending on what part of the year we're in. So I'm just getting ready to start work on the 2024 book in a couple of weeks here within the next week or two. And so it's, it has a lot there. So this month I'm addressing history repeating itself, but we have a whole lot of other currents that are going on. So we're going to be taking a look at these currents that are playing out in our world affairs. I do have a regular YouTube channel under my own name, Jessie on Nichols George, and that's a little more practical spirituality. It's a little more looking at concepts and looking at things from more of working with divine presence in the world and standing in divine alignment. This channel, of course, is much more based on what's happening in world events. So always those options to look at both of them. And I get some people that don't want to look at world events and some people that do, which is why I have the channels separated out so that people can have their preferences, really is it, which is nice, because choice is a great thing. Choice is a beautiful and wonderful thing. So that being said, one of our key components here coming up in February, and these are the currents that are going to be happening in February. So this is your opportunity to get that heads up on things, to really see what's going down, to see what's happening, and to start to prepare and start to plan for that. Because I think that foresight is one of the most powerful tools that we have to maintaining and holding on to our freedom, holding on to our ability to do the things that we love in the world, and to really thrive in this world, because it's challenging enough to be in a third dimensional world without having to deal with all these other things that are happening. So this is a great opportunity for that. So jumping in here in February, we are going to be seeing a lot of the past repeating itself. So there's, good things about this, because every time the past repeats itself, we want to take a look at what happened in history. We want to learn from our history so that we can move forward in a favorable direction. That is part of what it presents to us, as an opportunity to do things differently, an opportunity to try something that we haven't tried before. These are powerful options for us, and they teach us a lot. We learn a lot, and as we see these patterns, we realize that things are not just happening to us, but they're being created over and over and over again to teach us about things. And when we really learn about something, then what we can do is take the actions to uh, minimize something or maximize something along the way. So it's a very powerful time. Anytime we have that past, present, future connection going on, it's a very powerful time in our world. And what we're going to be finding out, particularly in this round of the past repeating itself in February, is that we are going to start to see the common threads. So the same types of things that have played out in the past, what are the common threads? It's just like when pandemic stuff hit in 2020, and there were a lot of common threads to things that happened in Hitler's time in the early 1900s. So we have those connections. So there's certain, which showed that there were certain tactics that were the same. Different players, obviously, it's not Hitler this time, it's other people in our world that are carrying through those motives and those operations. And so those common threads can show up in different ways. And this can be very powerful because as we see the common threads, then we understand how to prevent the challenges and the downfalls in the future. And we understand what we need to create greater stability and peace going forward in the world. Okay. During this month, one of the big things we're going to see is we're going to see attempts to wipe out our history. You know, history is like the elderly. They're like the those people that are the indigenous wisdom, so to say. History is something that we don't ever want to wipe out. Now, we saw some of this again going on when the pandemic was going on, where statues were being torn down, things like that. Those are ways of erasing history. In the past, we've seen it with book burning, things like that. So we could see some of these things maybe coming up again, or we might see it coming up in different forms of trying to erase history. We see it in our school systems. When they try to implement the CRT into the school systems, they're trying to erase other knowledge bases of truth. And we don't want to do that. It's very important, whether we like our history or not, that we preserve it. It's very important that we have it there because that is how we learn. That is a key component to understanding things and knowing what's happening in our world and being able to know whether we want to repeat something or not. And so these attempts to wipe out our history, we need to really take a look and say, what can we do to preserve our history? It's just like protecting the elders in a tribe. You know, if you go to a Native American tribe, you want to protect those elders because they carry a wisdom with them that nobody else has. They carry the threads of generation to generation to generation. And so history is the same way. They carry these threads of wisdom that we need to get through this world. And so we want to look with clarity at what is coming up, because this history, again, it teaches us what does and does not work. And so every time we go through an experience in the world, whether it is a pandemic, whether it is political battles that are going on in the world, whether it is war, any of these things, it is constantly teaching us. And it constantly shows us. And then after we get through the experience, because you can't grab everything in the experience itself, but after you get through it and then you go back and you look in reflection, that's where you can really learn about what did and didn't work. Obviously, you're trying the best you can to make the best decisions in the moment, but that's where you start to really learn things in the reflection. So if that becomes erased and non-existent, you can't learn from it. If you can't learn from it, then it keeps repeating itself. But if you learn from it, then you can stop history from repeating itself. You can stop people from going through things like Nuremberg trials. You can stop things from happening where people are put into suppression, where they're put into forms of slavery, where they're put into things. You can stop these things, but only if you preserve the history and don't erase it. So this is very, very important. They should always be teaching points. And we really want to look with clarity to see, what is the path forward from here. And again, you can't see a clear path, clearly what the path forward is until you're willing to look into the past. So always this continuous thread in many ways, and we know time. It's not just, so we have some chronological times where I can look at it, for example, with the codes, and I can go, okay, well, this code pattern seems to surface every 100 years. So probably every 100 years, we're going to deal with something in this realm or in this kind of energy pattern. But then you also have time, which is not tied to something chronological, and it's based on our fluctuation in society, our fluctuation as far as when we become too materialistic, then certain things will surface. And then when we become too much another way, other things will surface. So this is, again, these threads, these common pieces unfold. So you have both that chronological and non-chronological timelines that are playing out. Now time, and I'm sorry, I've got a lot of notes here. This is going to be a time of light expansion in the world. And that's always powerful, because every time we have light expansion in the world, that is going to trigger opposing influences. So every time something progresses humanity, every time something opens up divine presence or God's energy in the world, we naturally are going to get a reaction or a rebellion from that energy that tries to suppress it. And that's a lot of where we see this kind of good versus evil dynamic. Good makes some strides, and then the evil makes an attack. And that's where we see a lot of these battles that play out in our world. And so during this time in February, we're going to see a lot of expansion of light in the world. And that's a great thing, and that's an amazing thing, and it's a beautiful thing to see. And we want that to happen. And this is particularly going to happen where we use the wisdom of our past experiences. So if we implement the wisdom well in our world, we're going to make some major progresses, and we're going to have some major breakthroughs going on. And that is going to create a lot of fear and panic in those who are enemies of the light. And this is where I always say, pay attention, get rid of they're on this side or that side, because you got good guys and bad guys on both sides, so to say. So when you get down to it, you want to pay attention of, who panics when something good happens, who goes into fear when something good happens, who attacks that good thing when it happens. Those are the people that are working against the light. And then, look at who's being attacked also. Because chances are those who are being attacked during this time are going to be the ones that are standing in the light. They're working more in integrity. Nobody's perfect. People make mistakes. We all have mishaps. I see it on my computer. I go to put a message in, it changes the message on me, and it changes it to something I didn't put in there. And I have to go in and correct it. Hopefully I catch it in enough time, but we don't always. But we really know who comes under attack during this time is probably going to be working for the light, or is doing things to progress or open divine presence in the world. So here again, when we have all this confusion going on and all this chaos going on in the world, this really helps us to see who's where. And we have to remember that people can shift and change. They might be on one side at one time and on another side at another time. And the corruption works this way. It works through whatever channel it thinks it can get through. So, one time it might be sitting with the Democrats, and one time it might be sitting with the Republicans, and one time it might be sitting with the independents, and who knows? Because that's what it does. It's all about where can it get through. It's not tied to a particular party or any of these things. And that's where, again, going to the past helps us to see the patterns of how it works, so we can understand it and identify it and see it when it's showing up currently. So we are going to see a lot of panic, a lot of fear through the enemies of the light, and that fear is going to lead to assassinations. Now, what's very interesting is we do have some political figures in the United States who are often tied to assassinations, which are the Clintons, and it's kind of been like an ongoing thing with a lot of people that if you cross the Clintons, that's it, you're gone. We've also seen this, pretty much anybody who crosses some of these bigger players and they don't want to play the game, whether, we're talking Gates or Soros or any of these people, that they, end up disappearing. They end up, in strange circumstances, strange accidents, things like that. And because we do have this overlap right now of the assassination patterns and the death patterns, it's, there probably are going to be ones that appear to look like accidents or are going to try to be made that way. But what this could do is that some of these assassination attempts that come up, because they do follow certain patterns. Again, we have the patterns and the threads, the common threads that come through that are going to connect. We might actually see some exposure coming up in relation to the Clintons on this. Granted, there could be other people as well. They're just one that comes to mind for me on this. And so through these assassination attempts, or maybe even there might be some that are successful in there, we are going to see information surface. We're going to see information surface on those who previously were assassinated coming up. So that tells me we're going to see information coming out, for example, on Lincoln's assassination and the Wilkes Booth character that allegedly, assassinated him, and his connections to different things. We see Dark Journalist brings that out a lot. He has a lot of information on some of those connections. We're probably going to see more information coming out on the JFK and JFK Jr. assassinations in there. We're going to probably see how that connects. And I think what we're going to find, and some of the common threads that are going to surface, is our three-letter agencies. Because it seems like our three-letter agencies are regularly involved in bringing people through. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but they definitely seem to have a strong involvement in these events that happen in these situations. More and more threads are connecting in to FBI, CIA, Department of Justice, these sorts of things, to these organizations and their connections with the assassins, and where they made the connections and where there were payoffs and where there were setups. So there's a lot of information I think we're going to be seeing coming out on those three-letter agencies in relation to specifically assassinations that have happened in our country and in the world. So that's going to be a big thing to watch for. I don't think they're going to be able to hide it at this point. There's going to be more and more information coming out. So those are some of the common threads, and they all connect. Oftentimes, these assassinations, oftentimes when we're talking world leaders or big figures in the world or political figures in the world, often connect to happening when somebody is working on bringing down the central bank and World Bank systems, and the corruption, or exposing the corruption in connection with those. And that's oftentimes when these assassinations happen. So it's not just like randomly, hey, some crazy guy decided to go out and shoot somebody. I don't know if that's ever actually been the case. There's always been these connections there. So I think we're going to see more of these threads surfacing in February. I think we're going to see more connections to these so-called accidents that have happened along the way. I think we're going to bring out more and more connections of all these people who were in this position were taking this same action. And so our current people who are trying to fight for divine light in the world, our warriors of God, so to say, are going to be coming around and taking a stronger look at how do we do this without getting assassinated? You know, this seems to be a bad pattern that we don't want to follow. So how do we do it? You know, how do we bring this out? How do we bring this information forward? How do we, you know, stop this from happening and go in a different direction? Because this centralized currency, these centralized things are not favorable for us. You know, all it does is turn more and more power over to the corrupt elite that are out there. And, you know, and that's not what we want. And going to a World Bank, which a lot of the groups are joining together when we look at the UN and the WHO and these different organizations and WEF, EF and things like that are all trying to bring in this global bank, one world bank aspect. And so when we start to look at that, it's going to get interesting. And likewise, also in the fighting back, we could actually see some of the corrupt players have assassination attempts on them during this time because people are fed up. And so if they choose to react and they choose to rebel in this energy without thinking about it, without taking appropriate channels, we could also see that. So again, we really want to pay attention. And that means, you know, it wouldn't surprise me as some of this information comes out as somebody does make the attacks. I mean, you got to think about it. Obviously, they're starting to get concerned about that, like Klaus Schwab and Soros and Gates, and they're starting to get concerned about that because they're calling in so much more military to surround them during these times, like when they, you know, being in Davos, for example, this year, they had this massive amount of military there for them. So I think there's more and more fear coming up in these people who are trying to push these agendas forward. And it's going to be even more so in February. There's going to be a lot more fear, a lot more getting scared on the attempts of these people. So again, we're gonna see some of these connections with how these assassinations connect with bringing down the central bank. Basically, it's the same tactics that are being used over and over again. It's just different people involved. You know, one time it was Hitler, one time it was somebody else. When, you know, same people, just different. I mean, same tactics, just different, different people. And that's why people oftentimes refer to the playbooks. It's out of this playbook or it's out of that playbook because they always repeat the same things again, over and over and over again. So when you learn these things, then you understand what moves they're going to make. It's very important during this time that as a collective in our world energy, that we are remaining focused on advancements and that we do not allow the proverbial or literal assassins to distract us, because that's really one of the first things. You might see an attempt, and that's an attempt to distract or to just throttle somebody down to quiet them. And then, but if they're really afraid, they're not going to just, you know, give those warnings. And if you're bringing these things out, and most of the people who are going to bring the truth to the surface on things, they understand that they are putting their lives in jeopardy to do this. And that's something we really need to consider. I mean, these are not just people trying to bring something forward. They are literally putting their lives in jeopardy to do it. See, the corrupt doesn't necessarily fear being assassinated. It's usually only the good guys that are assassinated. You know, it's very rarely the bad guys that are in things. So when we look at that, we want to make sure we're not letting these attempts and these plots and these plays distract us from moving forward. Assassinations occur in all different ways, and they occur in emotional abuse, they occur in verbal abuse, they occur in more attacks on people who are trying to stand up for freedom or stand up for the right thing or stand up for aspects of humanity. And so we very likely will see that more on our social media channels. We'll be back to seeing a lot more vicious attacks that's probably going to be coming mostly from bots, because that's what they do, is they hire the bots to go in and make comments on people's posts and to distract them and to tear down their strength, their inner strength, to tear down their spirit and things. That's, you know, what they use them for, and to try to get them to silence and stop talking about things. So we want to be careful of that. And really pay attention again, because a lot of times these are bots and we don't want to jump into battles with bots. Like that's not going to serve us. We just got to stand strong in bringing forth the light. Just got to stand strong in bringing forth what opens up divine presence in the world and what can truly benefit us as humanity, not just what people say is going to benefit us, but what truly benefits us in there. We need to remain focused, on those advancements, and we must keep God's light and divine presence alive. This is so critical, because all of these attempts on things, all of these attacks on things are really about destroying this light in the world. Because once that light is destroyed, then the spirit is destroyed. When the spirit is destroyed, everybody becomes very controllable. They just turn their power over to these corrupt people, and then it's just a miserable existence for everybody, really. It's nothing more than a slave system at that point. We're going to see many attempts to block the truth about, what do I have down here? Block the truth about lies. So those people who are trying to expose the lies, the deception, the manipulation that's going on, there's going to be a lot of attempts to block them. Independent journalists, we're probably going to see a lot of them starting to get censored again on a heavier scale. They're going to try to have these people's voice squashed. That means probably going through some deplatforming for people again. Anything that they can do to squash that voice, to make it hard for them to get their word out there, that's what they're going to do. The platforms that support free speech, they're going to try to cut off funding. They're going to try to go through the banks and say, you need to stop this. You need to not allow this company to take donations, things like that. So we're headed kind of down that path. Again, we went through this in 2020. We saw a lot of it. We saw it in 2019. We saw, but 2020, I think, was probably the big year that we saw a lot of this happening. And I think it's going to be intense, because if we think that they didn't learn from what happened in 2020, the corruption as well as the good guys, then we're pretty wrong. We're living pretty naively, because I guarantee you they did. I guarantee you they learned where their weak points were, and they're not going to make some of those same mistakes again. They're not going to leave those openings that people worked through again. So it's going to get a little bit tough. And this is where, we always hear communication blackout. I don't know if it's really going to happen this month. I don't think the communication blackout is the big point this month. I think that it's more the warning. I think we're going to see a lot more heavy throttling going on, more the attempts again to censor. So I don't think we're going to see that total blackout or anything like that this in February. I think it's going to, again, be more of, look, we're exerting our power, our control over you type of thing. But I think we have some incredible independent journalists out there who are doing amazing work, and we just need to go to the facts. I mean, everybody's got their opinions in there and things like that, but we really need to get down to the facts and see the truth and things, and see it, whether that requires us changing our opinion or not. The key is to see the truth, because until we're willing to see the truth, we're not going to make the forward progression that we need to make. Another big attempt that we have coming in is the blocking of progression. And one of the ways that we're going to see this coming up is through deprivation. And deprivation is really wearing people down physically. It's outcasting them. It's isolating them if they don't comply. It is removing resources, making it hard for them to have money. It is going to be breaking down the health aspects, not giving them access to health resources or things that they need. So we could, for example, see There's been talk about it, so it's very likely it could be implemented where we'll see the charging for the C19 shots. We'll see drug prices increase probably during this month, so that people can't get the medications that they need. We'll probably see more and more empty shelves at the store. So it's important not to panic buy, but maybe every time you go to the store, you get a little something and stock up, so that you have a little to back you up instead of getting into that panic mode. So again, they're going to try to cut people off. They're going to try to do what they can. Again, they're going to try to chastise those people who are supporting divine presence, who are standing up for the truth. They're going to try to make them appear as the outcast, and they're really not. They're the majority, not the minority. And we need to remember that. They're going to try to turn people against each other. Again, that kind of division, that conquer and divide, or divide and conquer aspect going on. So we really want to be careful of that, because they want people to feel like, okay, I'm not going to have anything. I can't earn a living or provide for my family if I don't do this thing. So again, this is blocking progression by making people suffer. So we're going to see that tactic come out. Again, this is going to be done by taking away choices, by taking away resources, by taking away rights, less product on our shelves, trying to force dependency on those corrupt players in there. This is going to come back to, well, you can't really participate in this if you don't do that. We're going to see this aspect, probably a lot of attacks on the Constitution here in the United States. We already know that Biden has got some of those things in motion. He's going after the guns right now, the Second Amendment rights of the Constitution. They're trying to create ways to track people, which is, not about tracking them. It's about where do they go and seize their guns? Who do they need to deem as a terrorist in the world? These sorts of things. And just because somebody owns a gun does not make them a terrorist. It doesn't do that. The real terrorist will never register anything. They're not going to register anything. This again is about depriving people, making them defenseless. And so we have to be very careful of that. Again, our First Amendment rights are probably going to be strongly under attack in February. That is something that we're going to have to pay attention to. And again, all about making people dependent on these corrupt players that are out there. They want total power and total control. And the more that they can make people suffer and feel deprived, then, the more that they gain control. So we have to be willing to walk alone. We have to be willing to stand our own. We have to be willing to say, nope, not going to play it. Not going to be dependent on the material things. I'm going to keep walking down the spiritual path. I'm going to keep standing in my faith. I'm going to keep standing in divine alignment, and I'm going to take the soul's path forward. And if I'm going to be outcast, then that's what's going to happen. And I am going to turn deeper into spirit. I am going to take the time to strengthen my health naturally. I'm going to rest more. I'm going to pay attention to what my needs are. And this is a time where you probably can't rely a lot on other people to help you meet your needs. You're going to have to meet your own needs in there. So we must realize one of the big things we want to keep, especially in that process in mind, is that divine light protects us. So as long as we're standing in that divine alignment, we're standing in the divine light, we're standing with God, then we are going to be protected. It doesn't always feel that way. It may not always be the most pleasant journey, but we will be protected in that space. And the more of us that choose to stand in that space, the more that we open up a collective protection for humanity, for life on Earth, for Earth itself in there. So that's a big thing. Now, from the 1st through the 18th of February, 2023, we're going to see a lot of use of power and influence, and how people are using their power is really going to determine what happens. And this is where those who are using their power, we're going to see them making the progressions, and those that are misusing their power, are going to start falling from their positions. They're going to start losing their status. They're going to take some hard falls. They're going to have some hard consequences coming up. And so they're going to be falling from power. And most likely it's because those corrupt players are going to start turning on each other during that time a little bit. But more so it's about how they're using their power. So if they're using their power to make people suffer, they're going to end up taking a hard fall themselves. If somebody is using their power to further humanity, to bless humanity, to help people to thrive, then their things are going to go through. So again, this key of sitting in observation is so powerful for us, because that's one of the ways that we can really decipher where somebody's coming from. Watching things play out, we can really start to see who is on what side, but we have to let go of our judgments. We have to let go of our prejudices. We have to let go of saying, if they're of this party, they're good, and if they're of that party, they're bad, because that is not true. And we have to let go of believing it just because it comes from CNN or Fox News or whoever it's coming from, and saying, oh, well, if they say it, it must be true. Well, no, it's not, because they're all distorting stories. And you have to get down and you have to look at the actual facts, the actual numbers, and realize that what they say, there's truth when they distort it and present it a certain way, and they're all trying to present it to make it look the way that they want it to look. And so you need to get in and actually look at those numbers yourself to get to the truth of it. In this time also, from the 1st to the 18th, lots of power battles coming out, lots of scandals coming out. And that's going to be really interesting, because these scandals are going to come out on the big players. And a lot of people are like, yes, it's about time that these people got exposed. It's about time the truth rose to the surface. But it's been bubbling up for a long time. You know, it's not like it's just boom overnight, it's there. It's been bubbling up for a long time. It's just been censored, basically. And we're going to see some people removed from power. They're going to have their power taken away from us as a result of these scandals. I have to wonder, when I see this energy connection coming up, these power battles and the scandals being removed coming together, you know, it's possible. I can't say definitely it's going to happen, but that's the type of energy current that would lead us to start to see the 25th Amendment used on Biden, for example. Because what happens is, when these scandals coming out, like even the mainstream channels are admitting, yeah, we found these classified documents, and we found this and we found that, and they're kind of throwing them under the bus. His own people are really kind of throwing him under the bus in the situation. And why is that? That's because there's bigger scandals that they don't want you to look at. So if they kind of do this and go, okay, we'll throw Biden as the token sacrifice, then you won't look at all these other things that we're doing. You won't find all of the other information that we're trying to hide. But I don't think that's going to work, because I think even in that process, the doors are already open on those scandals. So it's kind of like we've been seeing these drips of the scandals, but it's almost like that's when the flood comes out. That's almost when the flooding of scandals starts to show up. So again, that's the 1st through the 18th of February. So we're going to see a lot of stuff pouring out during that time. And then from the 19th through the end of the month, we have a greater activation of that assassination energy. So here again, if you have all this information pouring out and these scandals are coming forth, you're going to have people feeling that fear. They're going to want to protect themselves. And that's when you're going to start seeing people come under assassination, because this is a pattern, right? Oh, you're finding out about me. Well, now I got to get rid of the people who are going to rat on me. I've got to get rid of, it's the cover up, as they say, the cover up. And the cover up, you know, always is going to get you in trouble. The more you try to cover something up, the more exposure that's going to come out from it. And so that's a lot of what we're going to see. And it's going to be very hard for them to start to cover these things, because it's going to be like, people are going to see those ties. Again, they're going to make the connections, past, present, and future. They're going to see, wow, how come every time somebody speaks up about this person or has information on this, all of a sudden they're shot, or their, attempt is made as an attempt is made on their life, or these sorts of things. And so that's where I think a lot of the assassination energy is going to come from. It's going to be an attempt to cover up the truth. And so that's going to make it very interesting. We've got a lot of death energy crossing on that time. So again, if you're a criminal, if you're a bad guy, so to say, if you're a corrupt elite, and you get rid of one person sporadically every 5, 20, 30 years, whatever, 60 years, people aren't going to look that much at it. But when you have to stop and get rid of 10 or 20 people, and you have to do that like in a very small window of time, yeah, people are going to make that connection. And so that's where I think we're going to see that exposure, and a lot of death by or of corruption. So we could also see death of corruption during this time. Again, this exposure of them breaking down, and that's, if you have a breakdown energy, what happens if they break down under pressure? Then it looks like suicide. These are accident energies, so it won't surprise me that even those that are assassinations are made to look like suicides. And that's a huge pattern that we have in our history of things. When people start to speak up, we see these patterns of all of a sudden people have accidents. They have common ones are car accidents, suicides, climbing or adventure accidents, or plane accidents. Plane accidents are another big one that we have. And right now, what can they do? They can say, oh no, the pilot had a heart issue and collapsed right over it, and that crashed the plane. And so, that's another type of cover-up we could actually see during this time. And people will believe that. I mean, ironically, people will believe that, but other people will also see the connections. And so that's where we need to pay attention to that. A lot of chaos is going to be used. So these corrupt players who are going down, there's going to be a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion put in motion. Again, this is designed through, they're going to use like a lot of slandering, a lot of underhanded tactics in this. So a lot of mudslinging going on. In February, a lot of people saying, oh no, and my thing isn't as bad as that person's thing, and these sorts of things. But when you really get down to the legalities of it, the biggest mudslingers are the ones that are usually doing something or trying to keep the attention off of themselves for some reason. So a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. It's going to be hard to tell different things. Those that are pushing these tactics, they're going to try to convince you that something is true, or somebody is lying, so if they're guilty of something, they want you to believe everybody's lying about them. And it's hard because it's playing two ways. On one hand, you have those people that really are innocent and everybody is really lying about them because they're the ones that are under attack. And then you have other people where, they're just trying to keep the attention off themselves. They're lying about other people because they've already done that corruption. And so they want everybody to believe that their opponent has done that instead of them. So it really is going to be quite the challenging thing, I think, to sort through some of that. The key comes down to is, what are people trying to convince you of? When somebody's innocent, they'll be like, look at this, explore this, take a look at this, take a look at that. But when somebody is coming in and saying, you need to believe this, you need to, no, this is really the way it is. This is really the way it is. And you've got to believe this particular format that I'm presenting to you. Then, those attempts to really convince you, as opposed to just saying, look at this and look at that and look at these things, is usually where the corruption is. because only those people who are corrupt really have to convince you of something. If the truth exists, all you have to do is look at it, and you'll see the truth. So it doesn't really require you being convinced about something. It just requires you to look at it. So that's one of the ways to see your way through it. We have to make sure that we don't allow ourselves to become divided during this time, because again, they're going to want to use those conquer and divide tactics here from the 19th through the end of the month. And family is going to be a big target and source of this. So they're really going to try to divide people in the family. So especially, if they know that there's sibling rivalry, if they know that they're going to try to trigger that sibling rivalry, if they know that people in the family are sitting on two different political sides of the fence, they're going to try to drive that wedge even bigger between them, try to create those battles. And again, like family as well, those that are like family, they're going to try to drive those wedges in, that conflict in there. And we've got to be very, very careful about that. If somebody is trying to divide you, if somebody is trying to play you against other people, that's where we really need to stop and look at things a little closer. And we need to open our mind up, and we need to make sure that we are, again, looking at the truth of things, taking a look and considering, why are other people seeing what they're seeing, really? And even though we might still hold separate opinions or different opinions, then we still want to leave that door open to get along with one another. We don't have to be in battle with one another just because we hold different opinions. And matter of fact, that again, those different opinions can be very valuable to us because we can learn from each other. We can learn what's important, we can learn what's valuable, and then we can look at the facts together. Even if we have different approaches to things. And variety is a good thing. We just need to make sure that it's not totally dividing us and totally pitting us against each other. And that's really the key. We must be practical and responsible during this time, and don't use resources that we have. So when we look at that component of energy, what we're probably going to see is the corrupt is going to try to do more to add more to our deficit during that time, put us in greater debt. And we want to really, as individuals, be looking at, how do we stay out of debt? How do we work with the resources in hand? How do we not add to this? How do we remove the debt even? So again, that's going to be another way for you to see who's playing on which side. Those people that are removing debt, genuinely removing debt, are going to be helping us out, and they're probably going to have things working on their side. Those who are trying to add more debt to us, again, we're going to find some of those scandals coming up and those things surfacing. Now we have another component that runs from the 1st through the 11th in our codes, and during this time we're going to see a lot of things connected to our taxes or our cost of living increases. And again, this is about diminishing our blessings. I talked about that before, that putting us in dependency through deprivation in there. And so they're going to try to justify these things. They're going to try to make it harder for people to get by. This is just like what happens when you raise the minimum wage and then people take less money home because they have more taxes. And so their take-home pay is actually less, even though they might be making more money. It's the same kind of concept in there. We're probably going to see more funding going out to Ukraine during February. Again, because when it's going through Ukraine, what it's really doing is funding the corrupt elite. And it's not really about the country, it's a way to launder money through there. So when that happens, then you open these channels up that they're going to keep dumping as much money as they can. They don't care what happens to you or I or average public Joe on the street. They don't care how many other people they bankrupt as long as they take care of themselves. And that's what we're seeing happening. So you're going to see more and more dumped into there at the taxpayer's expense, which is actually illegal. it's unlawful to do. It's not within the boundaries of the law. And again, that's going to expose more of the scandals. So the rough side is we're going to have to see our way through it. The good side of that is it's going to open up more of the scandals that are being used and more of these tactics that are being done in the world. And the key during this period for the corrupt is to make people believe that they are deprived when they really aren't. So we're probably going to see attempts by the corrupt people to put spending bills through, or for example, if Biden wants something to go through, he just will do it regardless of whether it's approved or not. He will just try to put these things through. So we're going to try to see a lot of things through. We're already seeing some of these. There was an initiative in California where they're going to pay reparations to Black people in the state of California for for being that, and they're going to put the taxes on white people. It's these kinds of crazy things that we're probably going to see, because it's about putting people in deprivation again. And even those people who have supported the agendas, they're going to start seeing the effects of this in their own lives as well. And that's going to bring another layer of waking up going on. What's going to happen from a lot of these things is that people are going to rebel, and they're going to stand up, and they're going to fight for what is right. And they're going to start saying enough is enough. And the people are fed up. They're fed up with the games. They're fed up with the players. They're fed up with these things happening. And so you're going to see more people stepping forward, going no more. And that's going to be an issue for the corrupt as well in there. And it's a good thing. They need to, but we need to find positive outlets, to, positive ways of doing this. And we need to find those options which are lawful. We need to do it in lawful ways in there. Now the 12th through the end of the month, we're going to see an acceleration of mind games going on, battle of wits, psyops. So I imagine there's a lot of psyops that's going to go down in the second half of February there. And the people that are putting these through, they're going to present it like it's this battle, and they're going to get everybody divided as that's their goal. Let's divide everybody. But it's not all about win or lose for them. So you're going to see where the news is going to capitalize that and go, oh, look at that person's losses. Oh, look at those person's wins. And you're going to see this battle going on in the news media about that. And really, it's not about a win or lose. It's not about taking that. What it's about is it's a psyop. It's a psyop to understand how the opponent is working. So we're probably going to see this on both sides in there. They're really not concerned, do I get this win or do I have this loss? It's going to be about, okay, I just learned a whole bunch of information about my opponent, and now I know how to move forward. So that's really where it's going to be more connected to. In there, it's just all about learning more than anything else. But it's, in the meantime, it's going to create a lot of chaos and get people riled up. And hopefully you won't get caught in those triggers and things like that, and that you'll be able to hold your balance and just stay in action and not reaction. Those that are in integrity will resist control and domination. So those who are standing in integrity, they're gonna stand up against where things are trying to be pushed through that are all about control and dominating people. And that's a great thing. People have that energy, they have the confidence to stand up in this last half of the month. And that's a very positive thing to making progression and increasing the divine presence in the world. And this is a time about learning to work with others instead of against them. And this is a big thing. So, a lot of people, for example, criticized Trump for working with Putin and working with Xi, and they were trying to, make certain things out of things. And, I use this as an example because really sometimes you have to come together with people that you don't necessarily agree with in order to beat the bigger corruptions. So if you look at it and you have Russia and you have China and you have the United States, and they're all big power forces in the world, okay? And if these power forces work together, even if they don't agree, you know, like the US may not agree with communist systems that are implemented in China. They may or may not agree with what Putin does and where he comes from and his power controls or things like that, you know. But that doesn't mean that these different forces can't come together to work to beat a bigger corruption. And that bigger corruption being the deep state, being those that are pushing through the new world order, being, you know, those that are doing different things. So I think that that's another piece that we're going to see. Those people that are truly working for humanity, they recognize we have to do something. We have to work with people. And that doesn't mean that we let them get away with things. That doesn't mean that we condone their wrongs or any of that, because we don't. But sometimes we do need to work with them. And so that's no different than in our individual lives, where sometimes you need to work with somebody that you don't really get along with in order to get something else accomplished. Doesn't mean you agree with them, doesn't mean you're going to go out and have best friends, sit down and have drinks with them or whatever else, but you do need to work together sometimes. So it's going to be interesting to see who comes together to beat these bigger factions. And we are going to learn from information exchange. So information that is brought out, we're going to be learning from these information exchanges that are going on. And the first thing that comes to mind is we want to watch those Twitter file drops. The Twitter files are, I think, going to disclose a lot of information, because it's going to show the exchanges of information that have gone on between different people. And that in turn is probably going to expose various scandals and various other connections and show us the threads and the patterns that have been playing out. And it's going to connect to deeper and deeper layers. So these information exchanges are going to be very important. And that's another reason why we're going to see those bigger attempts at censorship. So that's what we got coming down in February, people. Is that enough for you? It's enough for me, definitely. But the past history is repeating itself. And our goal is to learn from it and to move forward and to create a positive direction that truly, truly will provide us stability going forward. So again, hey, if you like what I'm sharing here, leave some comments, leave your thoughts, like the video, like the channel, pick up your copy of The Code Journey. Again, this is a blend. This is a blend of showing you what's happening in our world, but it's also a blend of encouraging you to take your own personal journey, find your own personal strength, and maneuver your way through what is happening in the world. And you can find that over on my website, compassioncodes.com. Just click on the goods tab, select The Code Journey. I have some shops that are carrying it around the US right now. It did some expansion on that this past year while I was traveling around. And so some places you can buy it live if you don't want to go on Amazon. And otherwise, you know, I've got different options for paperback and ebook, and you can find the direct links all there. So take care, everybody, and I will see you next month.